All right, so we're on lesson 2, and we're talking about today the difference between horticulture and agriculture. We talked about last semester how agriculture is this big, broad area with a bunch of different categories under it. So horticulture is one of those categories underneath the big agriculture umbrella. So horticulture is basically dealing with plants, gardens, from experiments to determine how to increase crop yield to creating new varieties. Plant scientists um, play an important role in the foods that we eat, plants that we put in our gardens. So it's a lot of science too. So there's a horticulture engineer. You could be a horticulture engineer. So horticulture is, let me put this, the art or practice of garden cultivation and management. Cultivation is working the earth, basically turning the dirt and growing things. So it can be very rewarding. If you enjoy gardening, if you enjoy being outside, seeing things grow, things progress, horticulture could be a career for you. It's a little bit different than just agriculture. They're both under Agriscience. So horticulture is dealing with plants. So to grow plants, you need to know some things behind it. And there's a lot of science behind it. There's people that they come up with new breeds of plants. This plant is going to be more resistant to this pest, or this plant's more resistant to drought. All of those are great things. They study the science of, this plant is good to prevent this disease, or this is good for this medicine, and research that. So there's going to be a lot of science behind it. Plants are grown in both ag and horticulture. But you might think of horticulture as more concerned with the plant than a product. So they're very similar, but there's some differences. So horticulture is more labor intensive than agriculture. You pay attention to every individual plant. The plants themselves may be the end source of profit. That's what you're selling. You're growing, just like if you were a rancher and you're growing livestock. That's the same with these plants. Horticulturists create and grow the plants, the agriculture, and develop the seeds. Plant scientists are looking for ways to improve them. It can be outdoors. It can be in greenhouses. Um, in many cases, plants are grown in pots for future sale. Like I mentioned last lesson, there's lots of different stages that you can work with these plants, from seeds to full grown, bushes. One plant may travel many, many miles to get to your porch. Horticulture includes plants grown for development and study, or to stock grown for seed to use for scientific studies. The grower or scientists, they are constantly changing the plant, looking at the plant, studying, does this plant need more water, more food? So think about in agriculture when they're dealing with plants, when they're dealing with planting fields of corn, they're not looking at the individual corn plant. They're thinking as a whole, because they're going to sell it as a whole. As a horticulturalist selling, ornamental plants or flowers, those sorts of things, you're worried about each individual one because it's aesthetics. You want it to look nice. Your name's behind it. So there's some categories. So outdoor production, it's like this one. You may go to and they can have, horticulturists can have many of these different categories in their own business. So like a nursery probably is going to have some outdoor, a greenhouse, and protected. So outdoor is growing plants, vegetables, fruit, and flowers outdoors. So these are soil grown or grown in the ground or container. So it's really common for vegetables and fruits, not really smaller plants. It's used for trees and shrubbery. So if you go to a tree farm, they're grown outdoors in those big containers. Protected cropping that relies on greenhouses or polyethylene, which are those big white plastic tunnels to grow plants in. It allows us to grow plants out of season. I loved my greenhouse. I had a greenhouse at my old school. It was so fun because it was pretty fancy, and it would be set to 72 degrees all the time during the day and like 68 at night. So I could grow plants. We grew plants in December because we had a county show that they showed plants at in January. So that was really, really neat, and it allows you to do some more fun things with it. Floriculture is flower farming. So that's growing flowers for cut flowers for florists. Much of the time, floriculture relies on greenhouses and other forms of protective. A lot of flowers, a lot of floriculture is done where the environment is cooler and it's nice. A lot of flowers that we get are from New Holland. They're from other countries actually because they typically have better weather for flowers than we do. Texas isn't a great flower state to grow. It gets a little bit too hot. But there are people that are starting sunflower farms for ornamental purposes and tulip farms and things like that. Nursery stock is the production of soil-grown or container trees, shrubs. Young trees, typically 3 years old. However, 1-year-old trees and larger, older trees may be available. So these are to have in stock at the nursery so that someone could come in and they want to buy it. Cane fruit refers to woody bushes that bear fruit, like raspberries, blackberries, all of those. Top fruit are going to be trees that bear fruit, so like apples or peaches or apricots, pears. So then there's landscape design, garden design that's really, really pretty. Interior landscaping, garden maintenance, they're all part of agriculture or horticulture. So they're typically decorative, but they can include edible elements that may be public, such as parks, outside of businesses, homes, like I talked about the medians. Interior landscaping is the design of interior plants, such as potted plants, large planting beds, like around your businesses, restaurants. Garden construction includes designing and building architectural features in gardens. So that could include, trellises, fences, retaining walls. So sometimes these are called landscapers. They can handle the planting, mowing, weeding, irrigation, and regular garden care. So if you mow on the weekends, in the summer, if you've got a little mowing business, you're already a horticulturalist. So that's awesome. There's sod culture. So that's sod is where they grow grass, typically. Like if you see a new house being built or maybe sport field or something like that, they're going to have big rolls that look like dirt, and then there's grass inside. They roll it out. That is sod, so it's so that grass can take off. So nearly all professionals in horticulture, they need to know how to take care of a plant. They need to know what to look for. There's lots of different diseases. Taking care of plants is a little bit harder than you may think. Yes, they need light, water, and nutrients, but each plant is going to vary on how much of each of those things they're going to need. So this says, what does a healthy plant look like? It really depends. It's harder than you think. Each plant is different. So if you're going to transplant, a plant should not be in flower if at all possible. Buds, if present, should be tightly closed. So I always tell my students, a flowering plant doesn't have much long life left. It's already bloomed. It's already done its thing. So you want to buy something young because you want to enjoy it for a long time, right? So the container you choose for transplanting should be the right size for the plant. You've got to know that. You've got to know how to transplant them. Carefully take them out of the container. Look at the roots. You don't want to buy plants with brown, soft, or rotting roots. You don't want to overwater a plant because they could cause the roots to rot. You don't want plants that are root bound. A root bound plant has little soil or growth room left in the pot. The roots have grown too large for the pot, so they need to go on and move on to a bigger pot or be moved outside.